Hello, my name is Lisa Reisman. I'm the CEO of MetalMiner, and we are super excited to introduce Jennifer-Ruth Green, who is currently running for Congress in U.S. Congressional District, Indiana District 1. Is that correct?
That's it. Thanks so much for having me, Lisa. It's an honor to be here. Very excited.
Great, really appreciate it. So I thought we could kind of set the tone of our discussion around specifically business and manufacturing. That's obviously something that MetalMiner is deeply involved with, as is our audience. And so I was hoping we could talk through and get your thoughts on manufacturing, trade, climate, economic issues, et cetera, and certainly in the context of the major industries within Indiana's first district, of which MetalMiner is also a part, happy to say.
Absolutely. I'm excited.
Great, great. So I was just doing a little demographic research. Manufacturing represents, it's either the largest or the second largest employer of residents within this district, our district. So I wanted to get your thoughts on a number of federal policies in particular that are impacting manufacturing, or let's say have impacted manufacturing in the last few years. And I'll start with a controversial one because it's one that obviously impacts a lot of the employers here in Northwest Indiana. But just your thoughts on tariffs. We could talk about steel and aluminum. I think for Northwest Indiana, we can focus on steel. Obviously, former President Trump had implemented tariffs in 2018. Biden kind of kept them ongoing, although he's tapered them a bit now and kind of switched to a quota system versus a blanket tariff. I just love to get your thoughts on trade actions, particularly for the steel industry as you see them.
Absolutely. So, like you mentioned, Indiana is a top 10 manufacturing state, and 25% of the nation's steel comes from here. And so we get the chance to produce a lot here. And manufacturing is a big deal, just like you shared. But it is impossible for anybody to believe that sending our manufacturing to places like China is going to be of benefit to us. It's bad for working Americans and it's devastated communities like Northwest Indiana, but also it's bad for national security. So China continues to strive to undermine our policies, undermine our industries. They dump products, they subsidize products. China does not play by the rules. And so we are opening ourselves to an industry and to a country that not only wants to overtake us in economics, military power, in worldwide influence, but they are going to do everything they can, and we continue to feed into it. You know, President Trump did a really great thing with his policies, specifically in regards to these tariffs. He stood up for American industry and said, China, no more. We're not going to allow it to happen, especially Chinese steel. He put huge tariffs on those. And so President Biden, he's going weak on tariffs because he wants to pacify foreign governments. He wants to pacify big businesses. And ultimately, he just wants to manipulate the quota system to their benefit so that companies can get benefit as a result of it. And so my biggest concern regarding these tariffs is after the midterm elections, when we see President Biden a little bit more solidified, he's going to give into the weakness of the China foreign policy, and he's going to eliminate these tariffs. And it would be incredibly unwise. It's about American jobs. It's about American national security. And we know that we can't trust China either way.
Good points. I'd be interested in your take then on I know it was called the Inflation Reduction Act. I know it also deals with a lot of elements within the climate change. And so what I was going to say was, I just get your thoughts on, how would you have voted on that act in particular? And then in regard to Chinese steel, and if you could just comment on, the Chinese in terms of how they handle the climate with regard to steel production compared to the US.
Absolutely. So the Inflation Reduction Act is the worst of Washington political games. Economists, Democrats, people all across the political spectrum agree that it has nothing to do with reducing inflation. We have special interest giveaways, paybacks to lobbyists and Democratic donors, and it has incentives and tax breaks for the wealthy to buy these solar panels, $80,000 electric cars, and it does absolutely nothing to help working Americans. The worst part, which we've heard about a lot, are these 87,000 new IRS agents that are going to target, no matter what Biden, Pelosi, Mervan say, working class Americans. built into the bill is the fact that they have to find funds to continue funding this bill itself. The IRS doesn't want to audit people that can afford lawyers and accountants and spend years in court fighting back. IRS data shows that if you make less than $125,000 a year, you are 5 times more likely to get audited. And so we are going to have to pay for this Inflation Reduction Act, which may as well be called the Inflation Expansion Act.
I appreciate your comments. What about the bill's 15% minimum corporate tax? I think that will likely hit some of our region's largest manufacturing companies. And I'm just kind of looking at some of the NAM positions on that, the National Association of Manufacturers. They appear to be overwhelmingly against the tax. I'm just wondering if you've heard of that through your conversations with manufacturers. What are they telling you about the Inflation Reduction Act?
Yes. Small business is a big part of America. 70% of American businesses are categorized as small business, and we're excited to be endorsed by the NFIB, National Federation of Independent Business, and it's an honor to be able to protect businesses. And so when we look at this corporate tax and we look at corporations and we look at manufacturing expenses and things like that, we see how, under the 2017 tax reform, when a company bought a piece of equipment, they could expense it. And basically under this new 15% minimum corporate tax, that's being eliminated. And it de-incentivizes companies from building factories and buying equipment, which basically means in the middle of a recession, it's harder to increase supply and drive down inflation and harder to get our economy out of the recession it's in. And so, clearly we have too many people in Washington who don't understand how jobs are created or how business operates, or they just won't listen to people who do understand it.
So a lot of times people accuse Republicans of not having specific policies or positions that they are for or do support. I'd love to hear some of your ideas of some of the things that you believe will strengthen the economy of Northwest Indiana. What would you do if you were in Congress?
Coming to the table with ideas is something that's very important because it requires listening, it requires focusing on the people that you're intended to serve, and it also requires a great level of humility, understanding that I don't have all the answers. And so in my 22 years as an Air Force leader, I've continued to serve and continued to learn more and more about the fact that I care about good ideas. I don't care where they come from. And so having things that are relevant to the district, learning from people that are here and in order to be effective is a priority for me. And so, yes, we talked about how businesses are essential, how we have a high percentage of them making up our economy. But at the federal levels, there are a couple of things that we have to focus on, which allow small businesses to grow and create jobs. And this will help the region's economy if we focus on tax policy, regulatory policy, labor policy, and the legal climate. Tort reform is a big deal for me, but we have to deregulate. Deregulation is going to be incredibly impactful. And I can talk, we can talk a little bit more about that later about some deregulation instruments that are currently going through Congress, i.e. Senator Young's REINS Act and things like that. But that's number one. We have to make sure that we facilitate small businesses by focusing on those 4 areas: tax policy, regulatory policy, labor policy, and the legal climate. But then secondly, we have to protect our industries from China and other countries that are trying to undercut our industries. We have the best workers in the world, but basically we have to give them an equal playing field so that we can be successful. And trade is a good thing for a manufacturing state like Indiana, but it has to be fair. And we've already established that China does not play by the rules. Third thing I would say that we need to do is invest and encourage more opportunity for careers and technical education. We're hearing a lot of these days about how this education student loan bailout is happening and things like that. And so when we look at the big picture and we consider how we have hardworking people that, college isn't for everyone. And I respect that. But trades, vocational opportunities, those are a big deal where you can gain and maintain suitable employment. And we have to encourage that. And so the other day I was at the Carpenter's Local 1005 Joint Apprenticeship Training Facility. It's a mouthful. But we got to see young Hoosiers do something firsthand with their career and skill. And so instead of bailing people out who make $125,000 a year for their grad school debt, we should be investing in America's middle class. The last thing that I would say in order for us to move forward and changes that I would like to enact, I think we need to prioritize investment in our infrastructure. So we have, I-90 here, which is one of the most traveled interstates in America. 4 interstates meet in Indianapolis. We have ports on Lake Michigan and the Ohio River. We just have airports and rail facilities. And so manufacturing and logistics are critical here, critical to the economy, and infrastructure is critical to that. And so we need real infrastructure legislation that builds all of those areas, highways, bridges, ports, airports, instead of wasting it on political handouts to special interests, which is too often the case. 5.6% of the 19,000 bridges in Indiana, they're classified as structurally deficient. That's over 1,000. And so that's one of the elements that's in poor condition. But we should fix those things. That's not what the infrastructure bill did. People in DC are sick of these political games, and they're sick of special interest handouts. We should fix the roads and bridges because that's what the bill was intended to do. And again, we see that Hoosiers deserve better than what we're currently getting.
I hear you. I want to touch on a different topic because it ties into infrastructure, of course, and some of the trade things, but I want to talk about energy for a little bit. I'm kind of going to highlight for everybody, Indiana ranks 3 in the nation in total coal consumption and consumption for electricity after Texas and Missouri. More fun facts. In 2019, Indiana led the nation in steelmaking and consumes almost half of the state's electricity. Indiana is the 6th largest ethanol producer in the nation. And the Indiana Whiting Refinery, which has recently been in the news in your district, processes 435,000 barrels of crude oil per day. It's the largest inland refinery in the country. There was a fire in the last week or so. It seems like it's not going to be as horrible as it first sounded.
Right.
And then I'll add, wind is 7% of the state's energy source and solar is less than 2%. I think given what we're seeing, and we're closely tracking the energy crisis in Germany, they're about to ration energy for both homes and industry. Walk us through how you think about renewables as part of Indiana's power mix, and just your thoughts on that in general, I think would be helpful to hear.
Absolutely. I think Republicans and Democrats alike want to take care of the world that we've been given, right? It's very important for us to take care of the climate, but I support an all of the above approach to energy. We need to use all of our assets, fossil fuels, renewables. We have corn-based ethanol, wind, solar, nuclear. All of the above are helpful for us to be able to move forward. And so Congressman Mervan and President Biden, they have an extreme climate agenda. And essentially, it punishes hardworking Americans with higher gas prices, higher electricity prices, higher food prices, and higher prices for everything because energy is critical to all of manufacturing. And so, like you mentioned, we're talking about Europe and how they shuttered their coal plants, they shuttered their nuclear plants, they bought natural gas from Russia. And so basically, they send this signal to Russia and to China that, hey, we're serious about energy and it plays a role in our economy and national security. And like you mentioned, they're facing a crisis and restarting coal plants. So people tell us, go all electric. Well, electricity comes from coal, natural gas, nuclear. So we're not even close to being able to support electricity production that's needed to make that transition. And it's a deeply unserious policy. And so technology, in my opinion, is what's going to solve climate change. We can support innovation and free market competition where energies compete to fuel America's energy future because we don't want the government to pick winners and losers. And that's a huge philosophy of mine. China and India, they're churning out hundreds of new coal plants this decade. They just continue to bring them online. And if we're trying as America to solve climate change alone, we're going to make ourselves poor and we're going to weaken our national security. And working class people like me and you are going to have to pay the price. So we can transition when the marketplace is ready, but it's not today. And anyone who claims anything to the contrary isn't living in reality. Fossil fuel is here for the foreseeable future, and America needs to be the leading producer in the world. We all want clean air. We all want clean water. We all want a healthy planet for our children and grandchildren. But there is a smarter way to do it, and technology and innovation are the best ways to get us there.
Great. I appreciate the comments there. And I know it doesn't sound very controversial when you say it, although I know to some it is. Let me switch to something that is a little bit more controversial. And then I would just like to hear a little bit more about your personal story and kind of just who you are and about you. How do you reconcile? And this is kind of an interesting thing, on the one hand, if you're elected as the congressperson for the first district here, I think there's been like a historic notion that you should be bringing federal dollars back into your district. I don't know why that is the measure of success, or historically that's been a measure of success. How do you reconcile that notion with your beliefs regarding a free market economy, fiscal responsibility, and limited government regulations, as you've stated?
No, that's an absolutely great question. And I think it's easily reconciled because we have to get to the root of the problem, which is career politicians and lobbyists who've corrupted the system. So I am intending fully to fight for projects that benefit the people of Northwest Indiana, not just the wealthy and the well-connected. And that's the problem with the earmark system. So earmarks reward people who have the power to lobby, and even members of Congress themselves. You get me an earmark, you get campaign cash. That's just wrong. And so we have, in the past, we've had bridges to nowhere, highways that don't carry traffic. They benefit somebody, but it's not the people. And so if a project is worthwhile, then it should go through the appropriations process, and it should go through the regular processes, not just be added in the middle of the night like we have these omnibus bills where we have thousands of pages that no one reads. And at the end of the night, people wake up and just vote on it, where everything, all that pork, like you said, is in there. These bills don't benefit the American people. They take away from us, our grandkids, and they benefit big government, big business, politicians, and the well-connected. And so the problem lies and rests in career politicians and lobbyists who've corrupted the system. And I want to be a new leader for every one of us, because again, Hoosiers deserve better.
Appreciate that. Thank you. So let me just ask a couple of fun personal questions, if you don't mind. You have a great background, and I don't think everybody knows your background. Can you just kind of like walk us through your career and choose whatever it is you want to share? We'd just love to hear that.
Absolutely. So the military is my family. Both of my grandfathers served in World War II. My father served in Vietnam, and I am a third generation combat vet who served as a combat mission commander in Baghdad in Operation Iraqi Freedom. And my responsibility was to vet and recruit spies. And so I graduated from the Air Force Academy and started flying right after graduation. I transitioned to become a federal agent, and that was an incredibly exciting thing. But it brought me to combat. And when I was in Baghdad, I really began to understand a couple things. The first of which is the human cost of war, and understanding what it takes for someone to be in that place and to fight for their country and to stand up and say, this is what's right and this is what we're going to do. That takes a lot of moral courage, physical strength, physical courage as well. And so it just creates this person that essentially is ready and willing to stand up and do what it takes, even if it risks everything that they find that they love. But then number two, it also taught me that it doesn't matter where you come from. It doesn't matter who you date. It doesn't matter where you're from. It doesn't matter what language was your mother tongue. It doesn't matter what your color is, your ethnicity is. What matters is good ideas. And so I don't believe that Republicans have a monopoly on good ideas. I don't believe that Democrats have a monopoly on good ideas. I like good ideas, and I don't care where they come from. And so if we are able to propagate an America that is ready to succeed for generations to come, then we will be doing okay. And I want to be able to push forward with that. And so the military has really helped me. I'm the baby of 6. I have 4 older brothers and an older sister. And so I love my family very much. My parents have been married 52 years. I like to fly. I'm a pilot, an instructor pilot by trade, and a commercial pilot. Started a nonprofit to develop and serve missionaries through aviation. I love teaching young people. And as an African-American woman, there are fewer than 150 professional pilots who look like me in the country. And so that's not a stat that I'm like, oh, all right. That's a stat that I'm looking forward to changing. And so when I walk in a flight suit, people just have never seen someone who looks like me wearing a flight suit or flying planes or teaching people. And so we're few and far between, but I want to continue to grow that. Again, teach these trades, technical opportunities for young people. And so just real quick, I was, serving as a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force, serving as a commander of a cyber unit, and working with the nonprofit, developing and serving missionaries through aviation. Life was great. And then February 4th, 2020 occurred, and I saw Speaker Pelosi tear up the State of the Union address on national TV. And when I saw that, it really just spoke to me really loudly, and it just gave me this visceral feeling in my stomach. And essentially, what I saw was the speaker was more concerned about getting applause, more concerned about getting a headline than she was for my life as a military member. And essentially, what she did with her actions was portray to our adversaries on a global scale that we have weakness and instability at the highest levels of government. And so, when you are in the constitutionally required location, the legislature, to declare war, I have to know that you understand the gravity of your actions, because I am responsible and the lives of other military members are responsible for what you do. And so if I were China that day, if I were Iran that day, if I were Russia that day, if I were our enemies, it would be easy to say, hey, they're split. Let's plan an attack now. And so that weakness in portrayal, I'm accountable for that as a military member. And so I just said, we need people who understand the human cost of war in the place where they declare war. And that's what led me to run for Congress. And I tell people often, if I found the solution in dog catcher world, if I found the solution at the mayoral level, then I would run for those seats. But this is the seat where I believe I can make the most change and fill the needs that I see, because Hoosiers deserve better, and that's what I intend to give them.